Welcome to C-Suite Blueprint Radio, conversations with communications strategy consultant and author Ed Barks and his guests. C-Suite Blueprint Radio serves as a practical resource for senior communications and government relations executives who counsel their C-suite leaders. Our goal? To help you achieve your business and public policy goals. Now, here's your host, Ed Barks.
For 25 years, John Gilroy appeared as one of the computer guys on Washington, D.C.'s NPR affiliate, WAMU. He has penned more than 500 technology columns for the Washington Post, among others, and spent 10 years as an instructor at Georgetown University. He also serves as managing partner at the Oakmont Group, helping companies increase reach and improve awareness for their podcasts. What's more, he has conducted 820 podcast interviews. Yes, you heard right, 820 and counting. And that's what we're here to talk about now, the how-tos of podcasting. John, welcome.
After 820, I should say, my voice is failing. My voice. I can't do it anymore.
You still sound in fine fettle, no worries. Tell me, John, what is the first thing a company planning to launch a brand new podcast needs to know?
It's the old 10-to-1 rule. It is 1 hour on the podcast and 10 hours promoting it. And that's what no one believes, but that's the magic formula.
And when it comes to promotion, I mean, what kinds of things are effective when it comes to promoting a podcast?
Oh, there's a whole list. In fact, I have a YouTube channel with 8 different videos on the details. You have to think about your social media presence. You have to have a strong show notes page. You have to understand your audience. And you can have a very small targeted audience and just have, let's say, 1,000 downloads a month and be very successful. But if you have a really big audience and you have 10,000 downloads a month, you could be a failure. So you have to understand your audience real well and understand how to use a wide variety of sources to promote it.
And what do podcasts make the most sense for? Is it that narrowly targeted segment of an audience, or is a broader reach?
Oh, I like both. I've done both. And for example, I have a podcast that's dedicated to the space community. I literally interview rocket scientists, believe it or not. I did a guy named Vince Cerf. We were talking about the deep space internet to Mars. And so we're really successful in that small targeted area. Now, the other market I'm in is federal IT, and that's a $90 billion with a B billion dollar a year market. And so that's a much wider audience, and I've had success in there. And so I think it all depends. I mean, I think there are niche markets in there that can be very, very profitable for just about any size podcast.
And how do podcasters learn to do what they do? Is broadcast experience necessary, or is it helpful?
Boy, I sure would like to say, when I first got on the air 30 years ago, by the way, I've been on the air for 30 years in Washington, D.C., I just called up a radio station and said, I want to have my own show. And they let me on the air. So I didn't go to radio school. I didn't go to announcer school or anything. I just think it's a matter of communication skills. And to tell you the truth, I think public speaking is really the best training ground for radio, because if you're in the radio or you're doing a podcast, you're in that studio alone. Your eyes are closed and you can't see the audience. Now, if you've done 200, 300 speaking invitations, you can see that audience. All of a sudden, those skills from face to face transfer very easily into the studio.
It's interesting. I had way back when I started in radio broadcasting, an opposite experience. I was the classic shy introvert, and still am to a great degree. And I hadn't done much public speaking at all. But when I got behind that radio microphone, something clicked on. And that I found made it easier to transfer to the public speaking realm as well. So I guess that can work both ways.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there's all kinds of books written about introverts, and plenty of introverts are successful public speakers. So, hey, everyone's got their own niche. And I tell you what, the longer I do this, I mean, there are people making money selling, crocks for sauerkraut and have podcasts on, natural foods. So it's amazing. I mean, there's a million podcasts just over at Apple. Consider all those topics.
And when we talk about a corporate audience, let's say a Fortune 1000, an Inc. 500 type of company, are they in it to make money directly from the podcast in most cases, or are they looking at it to reinforce some things they already do?
They were into it for brand awareness and increase reach. Those are the two benefits of the podcast. I don't think they care about monetizing at all. If you get a very large company and what they want to do is just make sure they have a presence, they They have people learn more about them. And so it can't be done in a haphazard manner. You have to have high quality audio. You have to have a great moderator. You have to have good guests. It has to be promoted in a professional manner. And I think that's it's increased reach and awareness, I think, is what the podcast is for larger companies.
Now, I'm sure you've heard some of these too. And what I mean by that are podcasts that are, I'll use the word inferior, embarrassing in some cases. The audio is fading in and out, or it's really hard to hear, or the balance is uneven. If it's a video podcast, that is a little cloudy. So what are some of the characteristics that separate a quality podcast from a shoddy one?
Well, you stumbled on the phrase. It's called a podfade. And I would say out of the 20 podcasts that launched today, probably half of them are going to fade away after 6 or 7 episodes. In fact, if you talk to the people at Libsyn, they have statistics on that, the number of podcasts that fade away. I think what happens, the reason people fail is because they get in front of a microphone and they yap on and on about themselves. Ba, 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 my dog Fluffy, this, that, and then they don't even start the conversation until 2 minutes in. I think you want to, open up and jump right in, just like you did.
Now, what do you have to think about? Let's say you're a company starting a podcast and you don't want to fall into that hole where after 5 or 6 episodes, all of a sudden you disappear. And 5 years down the road, when people are looking for wherever they get their podcast, they're seeing something that was in 2021 that is now 5 years old. How can a company plan to avoid that pitfall?
Well, let me tell you a surprise about corporate podcasts. Every year I do a top 10 list for Federal Tech Talk. And in January, I looked at last year, and my most popular show from 2020 was recorded in 2017. And so these podcasts have a really long shelf life. And so let's say I'm considering bringing Ed Barks in to speak at my conference. I'm going to type in Google your name, and I may listen to a podcast from 3 years ago to see if you're any good. And this is especially true, I think, for students looking to work for companies. If a student wants to work for Ed Barks software, they may Google and listen to before they go to the interview. And so I don't think older is bad really for podcasting. And that's the biggest surprise. I thought everyone wanted the best. And the interview I did with Vince Cerf talking about Mars, that interview was done 2 years ago. People still love it because it's fascinating.
And when we talk about that quality separation between good podcasts and the inferior podcasts, what percentage would you term professional, for lack of a better word? In other words, how many pay adequate attention to the things you mentioned, like the sound, the video, the host's capability, the quality of the guests?
Well, I've certainly listened to hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, and I don't know if there's a percentage. It's I think a lot of the people who what I'm saying is in the world of videos especially. So I always thought that you had to have a professional TV studio in order to have, great videos, but a lot of videos now are casually done, and that's okay. But they're casually done, but they have good audio. And that's a surprise about the videos. And so I think the number one is pay attention to the type of microphone that you have. I think that can make all the difference in the world. I'm using a Cooler Master gamer mic right now. And people who aren't professionals, what they can then do is they can go off mic. And so if you have a headset with a boom mic on, it'll prevent you from going off mic. Now, a trained professional speaker is not going to go off mic, but someone who gets real enthusiastic, they have a podcast about the Chicago Bears, and they go off mic, they sound bad. Probably training in a professional radio studio wouldn't hurt. I've been yelled and screamed at by many engineers, throwing chairs throughout the window. And so I've tried to train myself to stay on mic. So I think some of those are good lessons to learn.
Yeah. Oh, those engineers, they'll get you every time. I recall well. Now, a quick reminder for our listeners to keep up with the latest in communications strategy and training. Become a member of the communications community. When you sign up online at barkscom.com, you receive a checklist, making you eligible to receive our insider strategies briefs that offer advice on dealing with the media, speaking in public, and advocating before policymakers. You'll also receive twice monthly emails to help you sharpen your communications edge. Just visit barkscom.com and tell us where to send it. Join the community today. We're back now with John Gilroy and our conversation about podcasting. John, let's talk about the guest side of the equation. For a guest on a podcast, how does preparing differ from appearing on a radio talk show, or does it?
It's interesting. My wife, one of the people she works with, appeared on a local radio station, and he had like 10 questions he thought they were going to ask, and they didn't ask any of them. However, I think just the fact that you can anticipate the questions is going to put you in better stead. What I like to have is little fun facts. And so if you're doing an interview about, let's say about car mechanics, you might want to have a fun fact, say something like 6% of automobiles in the United States are manual transmission. Or you might have a fun fact. If you're talking about swimming, my avocation is distance swimming. You can say something like, did you know that over 200,000 people a year die of drowning? And if you can have a half dozen of these fun facts or punchy little things coming up, I just used one earlier, 1 million podcasts on Apple. And so if you have something, I like to tell people, in order to be terrific, you got to be specific. So if you have a specific that'll ring true, I think that will really work well.
Now, you recently posted an article on LinkedIn that alluded to the shrinking length of podcasts. So what is today's ideal length, and where is it going in the future?
Well, I think this is mostly a response to Google's SEO, search engine optimization. So example, Ed, if you do a 30-minute podcast and post it once a week, Google's going to say, yeah, he's active once a week. If you take that 30-minute podcast and divide it up into 7 minutes, 3-minute segments or 8-minute segments, probably like 6 5-minute segments, all of a sudden, Google's going to say, well, this guy's much more active. And so people are trying to, I think, play their SEO by having shorter episodes. And it may or may not work for you. I listen to podcasts that are 5 minutes long. I listen to podcasts that are 2 hours long. Generally speaking, I think the sweet spot for a podcast for the business world is 25 minutes, because that was the old commute before COVID. And in 25 minutes, in public speaking, I think the rule is 20 minutes. If a public speaker can hold an audience's attention for 20 minutes, they're great. In radio podcasting, I think 25 minutes seems to be the sweet spot. If you can interview someone, get in, get out, 25 minutes, you're done. I think that's a good amount of time. I think the shorter podcasts, they may be getting popular in the marketing world, but I think in other words, there's not enough meat and potatoes.
And I imagine one of the determining factors when it comes to length is the subject matter of the podcast. Is that right?
Well, I guess so. It depends on the audience, really. But if in a business to business world, a B2B world, I like to catch people on their car on the way into work or as they're walking or jogging. And 25 minutes seems to be about the month length of time someone's going to invest in the podcast or a radio interview. And so that's why I think that timing works for me.
And for a corporate B2B audience, what's a good format? Is it, maybe somebody interviewing a CEO or a C-suite person? Is it just somebody, talking for 25 minutes, or is it something else? Google
called me up and wanted to get in the show. And they said, what kind of guest do you want? And I said, do you have someone with a British accent? An Irish accent would even be better. I don't know. I love English accents. How's that for an unusual response? If you can say something, I said, can you fake a British accent? It'd be better. So I've interviewed Google and Amazon and Microsoft and everyone. I would rather have an articulate third level person than a CEO, because a lot of CEOs, they can be articulate. Maybe a CEO from a startup can be articulate, but many of them, I'm telling you, they're bean counters and they can't communicate well. So you get someone who maybe has, believe it or not, a theater background. I interviewed the CTO from Red Hat, a big software company, and the guy had a degree in English. And he said, I got this job because I'm good at communicating. And so I don't know about CEOs. I think I'd want to make it. It may get a better audience, but I don't know if they have a longer term audience with the CEO as a guest.
Your guest, I've got to ask, your guest that had a degree in English, did that come with an English accent?
No, that would have been great. No, I had like 6 interviews in a row, and I always do a preview of on LinkedIn, English major. And I said, wow, what's going on here, you guys? Oh no, those guys are all in the dungeon somewhere coding, all the computer science majors. They put us out in front of the public.
John, what's your reaction when you hear a podcast, especially a corporately produced podcast, that it just doesn't hit the mark? What do you say to a company that produces a podcast but could do a better job of it?
Well, for example, when I get a bigger company on my Federal Tech Talk and I say, how are you going to promote this? And they say, I'm going to send out a tweet maybe. I said, well, how about finding out what hashtags you should use, make a list of your keywords, get some images, and then send out 65 tweets over the next 6 months, then get on LinkedIn, do a video for LinkedIn and take that over to Facebook, and then have a YouTube about the interview as well. And they just don't seem to understand. They think it's what they say, build it and they will come, just because you do an interview with Ed Barks about playing baseball for the Chicago White Sox doesn't mean everyone's going to listen to it. I think you've got to make it available to that audience out there through all the social media channels you can.
Is there one particular avenue on digital media that seems to resonate more with podcasts, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, as you mentioned, or something else?
I would guess it's, if I don't participate in Pinterest or in Instagram at all, because that's not where my audience is. My audience are chief technology officers, bigger companies, federal information officers, and rocket scientists. And those people tend to be on LinkedIn and probably Twitter. And so what you have to do is you go back to the start of the interview and look at your audience. Who is my audience on? Okay, if I'm doing a fashion, fashion shoes podcast, I don't know. I guess they have those. I'd be on Instagram, baby. Hey, here's this week's fashion shoe. But on LinkedIn, that wouldn't do real well. It wouldn't do real well at all.
Yeah. Though we do see things like that on LinkedIn on occasion.
Yeah, I don't know how that works out for them. They're like me getting on Instagram and talking about, I don't know what, a jacket I just bought. They'd laugh.
John, a final question. What is there a number one tip for the company that is producing a podcast, and on the other side of that coin, the guest who is appearing on a podcast? What's your top tip?
I think energy level. If you can bring that energy level with you to the conversation, it's going to convey. And I think that's energy. I think long pauses are killers. And so if you can have high energy level, keep that going, read do a mid-roll read, close hard at the end. I think that's really important. Energy is very important.
And John, where can listeners contact you to learn more about how you can help them improve their podcast capabilities?
Oh, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. But if you want to learn more about podcasting, I got together with an audio engineer and we put together a monthly Zoom room called thepodcasthappyhour.com. And so you can go to thepodcasthappyhour.com and sign up. And I think it's like the third Tuesday of the month. And this month, we're going to talk about monetizing your podcast. And so you get a wide perspective. We have technology, we have monetization and promotion, and people, everyone's got a podcast, wants more downloads. And so this is a great forum for it.
John, this has been a treat. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Ed. Talk to you soon.
And again, thanks to podcasting expert John Gilroy, managing partner at the Oakmont Group, for joining us on C-Suite Blueprint Radio. This is Ed Barks. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to C-Suite Blueprint Radio with Ed Barks. Check out the show notes on the C-Suite Blueprint blog. While you're there, comment on this episode by sharing your thoughts in the Leave a Reply box. To learn how Ed can help you reach your business and public policy goals, visit barkscom.com. That's BARKSCOMM.com. Tune in again soon here on C-Suite Blueprint Radio.